pod number 1.
Yo.
Okay. Yo.
No
jingle.
Okay.
Let's do quick intros, and then let's talk about this pod, very meta, for 2 minutes, and then we'll get into it. All right, I'm DZ, product manager at LinkedIn. That's it.
Okay, I'm Samir, product manager at Slack.
I'm Avi, product manager at YouTube.
Ahmad, product manager at a firm.
Okay, sweet. Fantastic. Okay, great. So this is podcast number 1. Wait.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, this is podcast
though?
number 1 of Product Champs.
Okay, yeah, but
Right?
I wanted to say that the way you introduced yourself was completely about your job.
Oh, that's
But
true.
That's true.
I think in this podcast we are not our jobs. We are
I think that's super fair.
Yeah. Okay,
Especially
good.
someone who's
It
about
gets
to
the question
have a
number two,
different
like,
job by the time this comes out.
What is this podcast? Let's talk about that. That'll bring us back.
Yeah.
Let's not go there yet. What is this podcast? So this podcast is the 4 of us shooting the shit, right? Talking shop, being real, right?
It's our regular Friday call, but recorded by
we
popular
decided to-
demand.
Exactly. This is what we talk about. So we all used to work together. We loved it. After we stopped working together, we set up a regular Friday call, and now we decided to
100%.
record the Friday call.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's important. Wait, so why? So real quick for everyone listening, for like the 3 people listening, why is this thing called Product Champs?
Hi, Mom.
That's an interesting story.
Hi, Mom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hi, Mom.
Yeah.
Why is this Product Champs? What's the story behind calling this thing Product Champs? Samir, you want to tell the story?
Yeah. So I use I bring energy to conversations with hype words. And champ is one of my go-tos. Baller is another. But for a very long time, I would just have every meeting ID be champ and call everyone champ. And so I think even when I was gone, the team used champ.
Totally.
Plus, we are champs, right?
Well, hard to say. Okay, there's more. Just a little bit more history. So before, there was a short amount of time. Actually, I don't think this ever existed for Avi and Ahmad, but there's a short amount of time where all of us were co-located in a conference room in Mountain View. Remember this?
I got to experience it. You know.
Yeah, you got to experience it, right? You came up, right?
The fishbowl.
They had a glass box. Yeah, the fishbowl.
Exactly.
Where it was pretty much Samir's team, and Samir only hires ballers, with a couple exceptions. And you know, anytime you go in there, they'd be basically shooting the. Are we not cussing?
No, we're definitely no.
No, we're not cussing. We're not cussing.
Just say it. Just say it.
You're asking me to eliminate 60% of my dialogue.
Just
no, you can't cuss.
Why can't
My mom's the only one listening to this. Okay.
Okay,
listen. Your mom can hear a grown man say, "Shoot the shit."
Shoot the shit.
Okay.
So
now you've said
it was glorious.
Yeah,
look, you're underselling it. It was glorious, right? Because it was all
glorious.
open. You could close the door. You can say whatever you want, and to keep that.
That was the key part.
That was the key.
That was the key part.
Yeah. You could be real. You could be real, and to keep that energy alive. Samir, you started the Champs Google. What was it called back then? Google Chat. I don't even know what it was called. Google Meet Chat Room thingy.
Yeah.
That became this, and then after we all left the team, we resurrected it as a weekly call.
So. Exactly. I mean, I wanted to give the team a space to be themselves, to have infinite psychological safety, and to build products by asking more questions always. And often in work environments, if you ask questions, there's like predefined times to ask questions. Like, oh, we're in discovery, you got to ask questions or whatever. But like, if you're in the middle of implementing a feature and you start doubting yourself, that's considered bad. But in reality, it's actually not considered bad. It's just considered thinking. So, we always built product by, what's that word where you like ask questions and like
Socratic?
The Socratic method.
Yeah. That one. Yeah. So basically that was part of it. And really just having a closed door, but also a window or a glass pane was like key to us building this culture where we could see what's going on, but we had our own space to talk freely.
Right. So I have two things I kind of want to add on there. One is I think something that Samir isn't giving himself credit for is as a manager, he basically created an environment where you could be very open. You could say something like,
very open.
"This person doesn't know what the heck they're doing."
I don't know about that. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, all right. Listen.
It's fine.
By the way, Samir,
every minute,
like you veered into like office Samir voice for like 2 minutes of that monologue, right?
Yeah.
There's an inflection change. See, I mean, right?
Yeah,
right.
Which we're going to try not to do, right? Like the
We're
whole
not
point
gonna
of
try.
it
Yeah,
is
we're
like,
gonna avoid
right.
that.
I think what we're trying to preserve is like the realness, right? So like
the real.
we love
the real.
Okay. And our observation is there are not a lot of real things.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're not
real.
keeping this PG, Samir.
I'll drink my 0 sugar root beer. And you continue. Yeah.
Okay, so he created an environment where you could basically speak pretty candidly and openly, which was actually really important. And Google has a pretty tough PM environment depending on the team that you can be on, because the engineers that you work with could be pretty demanding in terms of the expectations that they have over you, as well as organizationally it could just be kind of a mess. And so I think I've had a bunch of PM managers now. I think Samir, you're the only one who has, in team meetings, there's sort of this like natural, like being able to speak candidly, because I think you basically give people the platform to do that. Any other team meeting I've had with a manager, it feels awkward. Like it feels
there's like a veil, right? You never get to like a level of honesty, right?
Exactly.
That we all got to, and that's why we're still talking, years later and doing this.
That's right.
You're gonna ask something.
Right.
I think that we got to get to the point of this, right? Like, why are we doing this, right? And I think basically it's that we think there are a lot of other PMs or aspiring PMs out there who don't have their own champs, right? Who would love to just learn, like, what does real PM talk like? What are we thinking about? Like, maybe
how do we think?
For us.
How do we
how do we think? How are we thinking about opportunities? How are we taking on projects? Things like that. So like, hopefully they get a more real version they get elsewhere.
Totally.
And for us, nothing changes, right? Because we have these talks anyway, and now we're just recording it so that if ananybody who is out there or is interested in listening, they're more than welcome.
We'll bleep out all the names in post.
Fair enough.
No names. Don't get fired. We got to keep working. Other than that, same old.
So one last question on this topic, and then pivoting. What do you think? And I'm asking you, TZ, this question.
Okay.
Because you're one of the originators of this group, besides Samir. What do you think about us four specifically? There was a lot of people who were in that fishbowl who came and went. Like, what is it about us four specifically that we've sort of formed this bond? I have an opinion here, but I want to hear yours.
I think so. Actually, this segues into another thing I wanted to ask you guys about hiring versus inheriting. So like, let's start here and go to there. I feel like. I mean, look, I think the team had lots of great people. We're not the only four. But I feel like one common thread, for the four of us is that we're relatively fearless with our thinking, right? Like we don't, like I feel genuinely that like you guys start with a blank sheet of paper like I do. You're willing to put out a point of view and defend it. You don't hold on to it, but like, you're willing to put out a hard stance and say, hey, let's break it down. I don't feel like when we go at each other's ideas, it ever gets personal. So, I never had to worry about like, oh, Ahmad's going to take this the wrong way if I tell him his idea is dumb, right? And either, probably we're both wrong. It's probably somewhere between us, right? So I feel like that. Also, I think there's a level of kind of horsepower, to be honest. Like we can riff on ideas together at a velocity that is delightful. Imagine if like you say something and like the three of us have to spend 2 minutes, thinking. Like we sort of say A, B, and then all four of us jump to like N, right? It's like 1, 2, therefore we're gonna be on Mars in 20 years. Like there's something ridiculous, right? So like that level of like horsepower, that level of honesty, that's rare. That's not a common thing.
Hey DZ, you mentioned one thing. Like blank sheet of paper. I think that's super critical. So like this idea we've heard, no one here came up with it, and we've heard it many times at Google. It's the idea of thinking from first principles. But I think people don't do it often enough, right? So, but I think it's so important. And often, like, you know, I'm sure many of the product managers listening to this could relate that, you know, you're handed an idea, or you're handed a project, and you're supposed to, as a PM, be the champion of it. You're supposed to, you know, lead the team, lead the product. But you yourself, like, haven't, quote unquote, done the math or done the thinking from first principles to figure out whether it makes sense. I think that's a very difficult position. I know all of us have had people come up and tell us at different points that, you know, they feel uncomfortable doing, like, both when they do the math, they don't end up in the same place. But they also feel uncomfortable having that conversation with people because there's been buy-in and there's been progress, there's been execution commitments made, etc.
It's a hard balance, right? Because you're a new PM on a team. You don't want to be the person who rocks the boat.
Yeah, exactly. But your first job as a new PM, by the way, is I think your first job as a new PM. Sorry, this is all over the place, but like your first job as a new PM is not to do ground up blank sheet of paper thinking. Your first job as a new PM is ship something at the door, right? You gotta earn your stripes, so to speak. Like, so
that's right.
Anyhow, so Ahmad, that's to answer your question. Like, I feel like the four of us have that in a way that I just don't see that often, and so it makes talking and thinking really fun.
I'll add two
and by the way, go ahead.
I'll add two more things. One is, I think we all have a certain amount of hustle, right? So I think to your point about horsepower, like, we're ambitious, right? And I think our ambition, we drive ourselves. Like, it's exciting to all of us. And I think we're also at, like, different places in our careers. I'd argue like all four of us. Totally. And so there's enough in common, but enough different where, like, we can benefit from each other's thinking.
I like that last.
True. I learned what all the cool kids are thinking when I talk to you two, Avi and Ahmad.
What is it? What is this TikTok?
Like, what's Gen Z thinking, or whatever Gen you guys are?
Can we do an episode on TikTok at some point? Because I want you to know I love that product. I don't use the product, but I love that product. It's an incredible product.
And can I just say that the only way I view TikToks, and I'm sure like everyone listening to this will hang up when I say this, the only way I watch TikToks is
on YouTube
when my buddy sends me a link to a TikTok and I view it in the mobile web browser.
And that's a sick idea. You know why that's a great idea?
PM got promoted all the time.
Some PM was a genius when he decided that. Or
100%. Yeah. I agree. Because I don't have it installed.
But you still get the benefit of viewing of experiencing it.
Yeah. Yeah, lower the bar. Lower the bar for the experience.
Okay, we'll table this one. We're gonna do an episode on TikTok.
We need a full hour to do it on TikTok.
Okay.
Great. What else is what else is next?
So Avi, I think you set up perfectly. You know, this is about us shooting the shit, talking, but also helping other folks. And so, like, let's dig into some of the things in our own life that we're facing, in our own career that we're facing. I'd love to get your feedback on one thing. So I made a short list. We'll try to make this organic and not weird and, and boxed up. But so here's one question that we've all been in these shoes on both sides. Well, maybe not all of us, but most of us have been on both sides of this, where we both hire people and we inherit people. And we have been hired by someone. Samir hired me as an example. And then when Samir left, the new person inherited me, right? Yeah. So this is going to happen to all of us. It's going to happen a bunch of times in the future. What do you guys think of this? Like, does the inheritor ever work out? Is it always a bad idea? Samir, that was a big sigh. You lead off.
The thing is, I find hiring very hard.
It is hard.
No, but like, I think part of this is because I think that the process makes you hire like a template, like a generic product manager. You do the interviews, you tally the scores. If the scores are higher and no one has anything bad to say, and at least someone has something really good to say, then like this person's in. And there's a lot of people that can like meet that criteria that I have seen not do well at certain types of jobs, right? Like, of course, it depends. I think part of this is also, there's another part of this, which is you can't only hire rock stars because there's not enough rock star work on the team. And like that becomes a challenge when you're managing. right? But the other thing is like if you're trying to like, there's a lot of people that come through that process of an interview with scores tallied up and like pass the bar, that the interview doesn't test for hustle. The interview doesn't test for.
But you can test for that. I mean, I test for hustle. I don't test for hustle in the interview. I test for hustle by what they've done.
And that's the thing. That's the thing. So I think you need, that's why I think it's really hard to hire. I wish there was an interview to test for hustle. There's probably not a good one, but if you just follow the rules with the interview, type questions, then it's the other thing. I mean, here's an example, right? People have so many diverse backgrounds. Not everyone is a cookie cutter Stanford CS, whatever.
None of us were, in fact.
None of us were. Yeah, exactly. Right. But I think, you need to figure out, I think it's about a read on people. And if you get a good read on people, then, you're able to sort of like find good people despite the process, I would say. I find hiring really hard.
Okay. That was like a 5-minute monologue. Wait. So let me just reframe the question. Really hard, but hiring's very hard. But that's another question. The question is, all of us at some point are going to go from somebody hired me to somebody inherits me, right? It's going to happen, right? No matter where you are, until you're running the company, okay, it's going to happen. My question for you guys is, what's your strategy for the inheritor phase? You're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have to manage it. Avi, go ahead.
Let me put out a hypothesis, right? I think Sameer's right. Hiring is hard. But I would argue the better of a job you do at hiring, in other words, the better of a team you build, the worse this problem is going to be. Right? Like
the worse it gets.
I think the worse it gets, right? Like if you build a really good team and then somebody else inherits this team, it's that much harder to like maintain that special thing you have. I don't know. I'll put it out there like as a straw man.
But I mean, look, my point is like this isn't one of those things that happens like. Look, if this is like if this is something that happens 1 out of 20 times, it's like just avoid it. Just avoid the problem.
Right.
This is going to happen to you 50% of the time, right? 30% of the time. So you even if it's worse, you still got to deal with it. You got to like manage it and think about it.
Okay. So
how do you deal with it?
I will actually answer your question, TZ.
Okay, good.
Okay. So having inherited many teams.
Okay, and having been inherited, right? You've also been inherited.
Having been inherited, but I'm going to talk from the manager's perspective now.
Okay.
I think the thing that I know, because from the other perspective too, of when I've been inherited, there's a lot of anxiety on the person being inherited.
Totally.
There's a lot of like, open questions of like, I was valuable, I had this rapport, I had this whatever. Is this person going to see me the same way?
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that I always prioritize doing is establishing instant rapport with this person and instant like psychological safety, which is I'm here to learn from you. You have been here doing these great things. Help me help you. And
smart.
that actually changes the dynamic of the conversation and makes the inherited person feel a shift in power balance back to them. Because I think that's really important, actually.
Let's say the
other team.
For all anyone who is listening and thinking about PM managers, this is incredibly rare.
Yeah.
Just so you know, at that perspective, I've had a bunch of PM managers. It's very rare to find someone who thinks like that. But if you do, if you are interviewing and talking to PM managers, like if someone does think like that, it's a good sign.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
By the way, just 2 more things, and let's have a round robin. And but there might not be an answer here. By the way, this might be one of those things where you just have to, survive and deal versus like thrive. But I think it's useful for me to characterize why it's hard. So I think there's 2 reasons, in my opinion, why it can be hard to make this work successfully. One of them is that manager-employee fit. Like the fact that the 4 of us, we kind of hired this ring of people. Like it's not that we had to build the rapport, right, Sameer? Like by the time you hired me, we had the rapport, right? Yeah. And we knew that we're a level of understanding that like, it's and it was deeper, frankly, than a random relationship, right? Yes. By far, right? Okay. So
our relationship is very deep.
It was like a mutual. It was killing me here. It was like mutual, right? Like you like when you hire someone, you're hiring them from acumen. But like, to your point, you find lots of people who are smart, lots of people who are capable, but you're also hiring them because you feel like there's a realness there, and you can connect with them, and you can work with them and coach them, and they can teach you, and so forth, right? So that's obviously not going to be there from day one for this new person. I think there's another reason though, and I wonder if this is like too political to talk about, but this is the real show, so let's talk about it. It's like when somebody hires you, they're also invested in you, right?
There's an inherent bias to make sure that you work
100%.
out. Yep, 100%.
I hire this guy, or woman. So their success is in part my success, right? It's not. I can't blame anyone else, right? I made the choice. I advocated for them. I got them through. Blah blah blah, right? So both of those things, I think, immediately don't exist when the new person inherits you, right? And so the question, I think, maybe we can, we don't have to dig super deep here, but I think the question I have for us on both sides of this. I mean, Samir, your side from the manager's perspective is great.
Yeah.
But from the employee perspective, knowing these two things, you're missing that rapport, and they don't have that intrinsic motivation. So maybe they do, but maybe they don't. What do you do as the person being inherited?
So actually, let me just step in, because I think you touched on something really important here, which is incentives, right? So when I inherit a team, when I inherit a team, it's actually slightly different than what you said. Most of it's true. If I've hired someone, I'm very invested in their success. That's a given. That part's true. It's interesting because when I inherit someone, I inherit them not in a vacuum. I inherit them with their social capital that they've established with the rest of the team.
Oh, interesting.
So someone might say, for example, if I inherited Avi, everyone I talk to is like, "Oh, Avi's great. Make sure you keep him," right? Like, Avi's great. Now, all of a sudden, I'm actually very invested in Avi, because if I lose Avi, it's like, why did you mess that up? Avi was great. So I think part of this is the relationships of the inherited person give them this like social.
But does that matter in the real world, Samir?
No, it does, because I mean, because I as a if I'm inheriting a team, chances are I am new myself, and if I'm new myself, then I am also on this journey of building credibility with the team. And if I start losing people that others like, it's a credibility hit to me. So I think this is if you then switch to Avi's perspective, in this case, the person being inherited, they're thinking from their side, like, I wonder if Samir's invested in me. I know I'm good. Everyone thinks I'm good, but I don't know if Samir cares. And that's why I've always found that the first thing I got to do is go to Avi and say, I'm here to learn from you. Like, I'm here to make you successful. Now, all of a sudden, and by the way, it actually helps me because I genuinely want to learn from Avi. But at the same time, it's the best shot I've got of giving him the respect he deserves, in this case, and helping him stay on the team that his team is, so happy to have him on, right? So that's how I would retain Avi in this case as a manager. The incentives go both ways to preserve the inherited person.
Yeah, and I think that rings true, right? Like, I think that as the person being inherited, right, a lot of it is about trust, right? Presumably you had all this trust with your former manager. You had a shorthand, right? So you didn't need to necessarily spell everything out. You could make certain decisions. You had a lot of autonomy, presumably. And all of a sudden, I think the fear is that, like, there isn't that trust. There isn't that shorthand. And therefore, like, the manager could make the choice to either take away that autonomy, either like as a means of learning, or because there's that lack of trust, right? Become a little more hands-on, which feels weird, especially if you have a rapport on your team where, like, you have your own level of respect and all of a sudden that gets taken away. So I think, like, what Samir's saying is the right way to do it, right? Which is to, like, preserve that autonomy, preserve that respect, but also at the same time learn. Like, have a humility where it's like, I'm coming in to understand how the team works. I understand what you do, and really approaching it that way.
And DZ, this goes exactly to what your point was earlier, which is the first thing. I think it applies to managers too, which is the first job I have is to ship. It's not to, like, change the board game around. Like, I think the first thing to do is ship, and learning is the best way to figure out what to ship.
Ahmad, we can wrap this up, but Ahmad, you're gonna say something, and then I want to close this out and move on.
No, I think everything's been pretty much said. I think, I think we can move on.
Okay. The only thing I was going to add here, real quick, before we just wrap this up, is, like, I think it's also pretty situational, right? So, like, if you're inheriting a highly functional team, Samir, your strategy is spot on, which is Let's keep it going. Let's ship, right?
This is a great point.
But like that's like at least a third of the time that's not the case, right? You know,
Agreed.
One of the reasons for moving leaders around is like this area is failing, this strategy is not working, this is the wrong.
That is true,
right? And so you also have the situation where like your job being brought in as a new leader or the manager or whatever is to break up the team or reform the team or reset the team, right? So I don't know. We can come back to this topic over and over. I think it's one of those things where like I always wonder if the inherited relationship can ever be as good as the the hired relationship. I always wonder if like it can ever exceed it. I'm not sure. I also think it's like one of those things where like none of us have a real choice. Like you're gonna deal with this.
Well, let's do a quick pulse check amongst us. Like, how many of you? What's the number of great managers that you have in terms of in the hired bucket versus the inherited bucket?
Yeah, I mean it's like 3 to 1, right?
Yeah,
I mean, 2 to 1. I mean,
right? I think mine's like 3-0. Yeah.
So so you basically what I'm saying is that you should go into it knowing that on average it'll be worse, right? And there's these techniques that Samir mentioned as a very thoughtful manager and how you should do it. There's techniques that you can think of, like you can basically reverse the thought process, right? What is this guy thinking? What is he afraid of? And therefore, how can I help as the new person he inherited? You should go into it with open eyes and do all this stuff. And then candidly, there's probably a 40% mortality rate, like probably a third of the time, half the time.
I think that's reasonable. I think that's very reasonable. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This is a good topic. I think this is one of those things people don't talk about. This is why I want to talk about it with you guys.
I got more topics. It's good for people to set expectations with themselves if they enter a situation like this. I think it is super helpful.
Yeah, +1. Yeah, you should know what the survival rate is of anything, right? And then have the right expectations around that. Let's move to a different topic, very topical. I mean, especially for you three, but also for me, which is COVID, work from home. Right, we're winding. It's early July. We all work for medium-sized to large tech companies. Supposedly, we're all going back, or some of us are going back. Me, I'm looking at myself in the fall. I'm not sure. How's it working? So basically 3 questions, and I'll lead off, and then let's have a conversation. So, is it working? What are the long-term effects for you, and your career? And what are the product opportunities? So, is it working for you? What are the long-term effects for you?
Well, what are this the is opportunities? Such a time. I don't know how you timed this, DZ, because speaking of work from home COVID, I'm literally gonna get my daughter's baby monitor because she's sleeping and.
So it is working. I mean, look, you couldn't do this if you were in the office. Right?
This is literally the baby monitor here. Yeah.
Okay. Is it working? Let's just go around. Is it working? Let's start with that. Is it working for you guys? Is it working for your team? Actually, is it working for you and your team?
What do you think?
I could start. Yeah. So for what it's worth, I work for a permanently remote company, and they are remote first, which means they are investing the resources, time, and effort to making sure that people who are remote have equal opportunity and equal capability than people who are in an office, which is important. And I'll answer your question. Does it work in a second?
Sure.
But I actively sought out a remote first environment because, my perspective is I'm paid to think. We're not living in the Industrial Revolution. I don't need to be in a particular city to do my job. And so, when I was looking for a new gig, I was looking for somewhere where I never had to worry about being somewhere. Now, is it working? I think the answer to this question is different between like COVID and non-COVID eras. Because I think, as a PM, are we allowed to say names if it's good things or no names?
No.
Leave the names out. Leave the names out. Do you need the name to tell the story?
I mean, you don't need the name.
It's for funny for it's just to make it funny for you guys, But
we'll find out post pod.
Okay, got it. So I think if I look back at my experience when I was joining Google Ads and YouTube Ads, and I was trying to I was going from no ads experience to like launching something that is going to go out to advertisers. I needed, if you guys remember back in the LAX office, there's an engineering manager who basically ran a very tight ship. And
fair enough.
Basically, you go in there and it's dead silent in there, right? It's like like out of the White Walkers from, Game of Thrones, like it's just quiet and everyone's coding, pretty extensively. And so I'd go in there and I'd find one of those engineers and I'd basically just ask all of my stupid questions. I'd get to a whiteboard and I'd communicate my ideas visually through a whiteboard. And that person would take, the patience to sit with me until I fully understood how things worked. And that is 100% missing from a remote first environment a remote environment. But I think it just hurts more during COVID because I can't see these people. I think had remote work been a little bit more established and there's no pandemic, I think there would be things like, Ahmad is joining in, the month of July. Let's all try to be there in an office the first 2 weeks to be there to answer his questions and ramp him up. I think we'll start to see more of those things, I think, in fully remote work environments, but that's my perspective.
Okay. Let's hear a few more.
I agree with you, Ahmad. I think a lot of people make the mistake of saying that there was before COVID, and that was not remote. And then there was during COVID and that was remote. And I think the truth is, and what you're saying is absolutely correct, which is post-COVID or in a year from now, whenever it is, even in a fully remote role, you'll have the opportunity to go spend a week, a quarter with your team, or go be in person, or get people together, get the whole team together. And I think you'll find a much better blend. So DZ, to your question, I think it's worked surprisingly well, right? I think.
Actually, let's unpack that real quick. So let me dig into that one sec for you, just because you mentioned it works surprisingly well. So I think what's worked surprisingly well, right, which is why this time period is interesting, is full remote. If everyone is on Zoom or GBC or Teams or whatever, it works surprisingly well, right? You have these. There's actually some benefits, right? There's some downsides, but some benefits, and so that's worked astonishingly well, better than I think basically anyone predicted. But now we're going to go into this mode. Or it looks like we're going to go into this mode for a lot of companies, maybe not some of the ones you guys are in, but for a lot of companies, where it's going to be mixed. Some people are going in 4 days a week, 5 days a week. Some people are full remote. Some people like me probably go in the office 2 days a week. So my question is full remote works great. Fully in the office seems to work too. I mean, we did, decades of this stuff. What about this kind of weird in-between thing that we're about to walk into where half the team, some random half of the team is never there?
Yeah.
Well, so I think it depends too, right? Is it the leadership half? Is it just purely
Both?
half?
Both?
It's I think that matters, by the way. I think who is in the office more or not, or if it's evenly divided, it is the crucial factor here. Sorry, Samir.
No, I just that it's interesting that we're having this conversation because all of us have this very unique perspective and shared experience of working with a distributed team. So it's not remote.
Yes.
But whatever, for 6 of my 8 years, I was on a plane every 2.5, 3 weeks.
Yeah, same
because
here.
I'd be in Seattle. Yeah, all of you, right? And we've always worked with teams that are not in the same city as, not the complete teams haven't been in the same city as us. And so that's not the same as remote. That's not the same as work from home. But that's not also in the same office. And we've been successfully been able to build stuff. So I think none of us are saying that everyone needs to be the same place. I think that's one truth, right? Everyone here is saying that we've seen success in fully remote. We've seen success in distributed.
Yes.
And I think from my perspective, there's 2 parts that I find hard. One is I tend to work with people I really like, and I tend to like the people I really work with, and so building bonds is harder over VC. If you remember, a lot of our one-on-ones were walking one-on-ones where we just like walk around the building in circles.
Or dinner
that stuff you can't.
Whatever.
Yeah, you can't exactly right. So that stuff's hard. And
but again, that's a COVID thing, right? Not necessarily a remote thing, because in theory you could still fly it, right? You could still fly out. I could visit you in Seattle. We can get dinners and do a walk. We could still build the rapport.
That's true, but now 100%. I think on a one-on-one, point-to-point basis, yes. But if I'm here and you're there, and DZ and Avi are in 2 different cities, that's a lot of flying. Agreed, it's probably possible at some points. And then the other one is boundaries. So say everything works. Some people are just better than others at boundaries, and I'm not good. I'm very good at not expecting my team to do anything outside of anything, work hours. And it's not like I work all the time either, but I find it hard to step away and forget work when I'm like, one room away from my home office. And it's like something it's not a bad thing. Is I need to grow in that area to like be okay with that and like disconnect, even though my office is in another room. So that's what hasn't worked for me. Like it's been very hard to, partition the day. Speaking of partition, you guys continue. I'm going to pick up my daughter. I'll be back.
Okay.
She woke up.
Actually, speaking of which,
just trying. I'm trying to unpack this for myself a little bit, just to understand. Also, we should cover the last bit and then move on about product opportunities. But like, I feel like kind of the deeper lesson or like thing here is dependability.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and it actually goes. It's way beyond like working from home or working remote or COVID. It's like, if I need to talk to my manager or someone on my team or someone on my engineering team or design team or whatever, is there a routine? Oh, look at this. Is there a routine where like is there a reliable way for me to talk to that person within the next day or two? Right. And if there is, I think a lot of what we need so the human bond relationship thing that, probably has to always be in person to a certain extent. But like, I think the thing for me that I want to solve for, the thing I think that full remote solves for and fully in the office solves for by definition, even a distributed office environment like we had also solves for is dependability. So if I know that, hey, you're going to be here every Tuesday, right? Or in the office every Wednesday or something, like there's a kind of a set routine where you can build like that rhythm of like weekly, things, then it feels like all of this stuff is workable. Or even once a quarter, maybe Ahmad, like the real strategy here is like close all the offices, fly everyone to Vegas 1 week per quarter, not to, party the party, but also partly to like get together and talk and do stuff, right? That routine.
Exactly.
A lot of remote work culture is pre-pandemic. There's a lot of companies that are actually doing this already pre-pandemic. And everyone's like, "Oh, you guys are crazy," and now, now they're geniuses because they have already figured it out by the time the pandemic hit. But they had
do what I just said, like once a quarter.
Once a quarter, they would go like they usually. I mean, I think the example I heard was like a cabin somewhere, and they would spend a week of like. Very intense focused strategy meetings and
know each other.
And then there's, at night they would they'd spend all this time together. They'd spend like this very intense time. They'd build these perspectives. And then, that would carry them for the quarter in terms of like working that through.
I would love that model, by the way. I've always wanted to take my team, like back when I was at Google, like, again, obviously you guys were there, like the entire engineering team was in LA. I was like, and mostly it was self-contained, right? I was like, we could just fly everyone to Thailand for a month. Nobody would know.
Although we never did, just to be clear.
That's right. Yeah, whoever's listening, we never that expense report never got that. But I'm like, why did we not do it? It was so sensible to do. High-speed internet. Mostly the people I want to talk to were in that room, right? It was cheaper in Thailand.
Yeah, I think the hot thing is that it could work better, right? Like I think that like if you're intentional enough about it, right? And you really start to practice flexing this muscle, you could build something much better.
Yeah. Once you lean into it, you could probably figure something out that works really well.
There's another part to this too, which is autonomy. If like Ahmad said something like, I'm paid to think, which is largely true. I think if you can, well, you're also paid to do. That's what I mean by largely.
That's true.
Shame us into eating healthier. This is all part of
all things he does. But like, I would find it much easier versus harder to be remote, regardless of the rest of the team. By the way, like if they're all in one place or all remote, if I could do my job in a self-contained way, and so I expect like if I was coding up a feature and it wasn't like dependent on 5 other teams I need to go talk to every day, that's great work for City. But I think if I have to work with many different teams, which is very common with product, and shipping involves roadmaps that need to intertwine in certain ways, then the unplanned get-togethers are actually something you can't take, right? So it's like yes, we could once a quarter get together in a nice place. We should do that anyways. But then what about the Thursday night or Thursday evening? Like, guys, we have, 2 roadmaps that are going to collide. brainstorms.
So I think this goes actually really well with the thing that Avi said, which is like, I think this year for most companies out there worked well because everybody was remote. It gave everybody equal playing field, but it also allowed, I think this is my perspective on watching meetings and steerings and big decisions be made over the last year. It actually forced an objective view as much as it could on like decision making, because there's no hallway conversations to like grab, VP and be like, and like try to sway. There's no personal bias.
Less personal.
Less personal bias. And so as a result, I've seen that people have actually made, my experience, more objective decision making as a result of 100% forced remote.
That's interesting.
That's very interesting.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
Yeah, keep an eye out for it.
I mean, we this is something we'll come back to, I'm sure, over the next couple of months. Just to wrap this up and move on to the next topic. Like, I feel like the negatives here, first of all, to Avi's point, it could actually end up being better. Hard to predict right now, but it could actually end up being better than either system we've had in the past. And even if it's not better, let's just assume it's marginally worse than full remote or fully in the office. Even if it's worse, I think that loss is more than made up for better access to talent.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
100%. 100%.
Right? So
100%.
so like whatever you lose, you gain, fivefold or some ridiculous ratio. So net
Here,
it ought to be better.
Let's do a quick round robin. If you're starting a company tomorrow, right? What model would you choose?
As someone who is starting a company tomorrow, we're doing a remote. We're doing fully remote, and we're going to lean in heavily into like creative ways that we can foster some similar types of culture. So that's what I would do, is like fully embrace fully remote work.
Okay, to answer that question, I mean, to answer like if money were no object and everything, look, the ideal situation is me and the co-founding team is co-located, especially at first, right? The ideal, right? But like, would I trade that? Like if it was between like a B team but co-located and an A team but distributed all the way, right? But if you give me the A team, by the way, it's not just A team, it's like an A team that I worked with closely, I have a deep relationship, there's all these factors.
Yeah.
And all those factors, by the way, in general, bias towards co-location, right? Because they're people I worked with.
I mean, we're in 4 different cities, and we'd all sign up to work together.
Yeah, totally. Right? Yeah, but I mean, how do we come to work together, right? So my point being, like, if it were completely up to me, co-located, but if I were trading co-location to get access to better people like you guys to work with, 100% distributed, no question. Actually, it's just a function of the people. Like, where are the people I want to work with? That's the only question.
I think that's it. Yeah, but when you ask
exactly
that question,
correct. Yeah.
When you ask that question, like, the first thing that came to mind was, where are the people? Because I can't expect people to move cities.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I want to work with them, and like that will dictate it. Although there is something to be said about having an office that everyone can go to if they want, even from time to time, and
that's why WeWork's gonna come back. It's gonna make a comeback.
Yeah.
I want to take an opposite stance than DC. I agree with most of what you said, but I disagree with one thing, which is I think a trap is having the founding leadership team be in person.
That's the expectation.
That's the expectation. I think if you're going to do it, right, if you want to do what Ahmad said, you intentionally have to have the founding team distributed and solve for that, right? I think it forces you to solve for that and to create a company culture where like it actually achieves that. I think if you put the founding team together, you start off in an old world trying to engineer the
Yeah, no, you're actually right. I mean, this is the AWS story played out with humans, right? Like,
yes,
if you want a cloud computing system, force interoperability through APIs only.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And here you're saying, hey, if you want this real thing, you got to force it in the beginning and set the tone.
Yeah.
Which is why companies like Atlassian, they fully leaned into that, and which is a little crazy why Google, our alma mater, is they sell remote collaboration. And we're on Google Hangouts for crying out loud. We're on Google Meet, and
it's Google Meet,
and they're not even leading. Yeah, sorry, Samir.
We should dig apart that decision someday. Like, I wonder how much real estate plays into this, right? As an example.
It's still a bit hypocritical. I mean, the company is like basically the internet, and then like they're like, you know what, we're gonna
I
force
think there's a lot of benefits to being I think there's a lot of benefits to being in the office also. So I hear you, Ahmad, but first of all, the Google offices are amazing. Secondly,
that is true.
You
That's
know,
legitimate.
That is
For everyone listening, that part we
Yeah.
can verify.
Secondly, I think that it's yet to be proven at a company the size and scale of Google that new product innovation can continue in a remote first world.
And also, by the way, if you have that many people, just by dumb luck, some of them will be co-located, right? People want to live in city. I mean, you want to live in LA, you want to live in Atlanta. You want, like, just by sheer random chance, you're going to have, like, at that scale, 250,000 human beings in the US or, you know, globally.
Yeah.
You're going to end up with pockets of thousands of people who want to, because they want to live in New York or SF or Miami or wherever. Okay. So we're running a little long time. I want to quickly tease actually some of the topics we did not get to, which we're going to come back to because they're really hot topics. So one
tease
topic,
away, DZ.
Tease away. Let's tease. Let's lay the lay.
Okay, that's not teasing. Why don't you start teasing? Tease.
Okay. So one question: what should smart PMs do in the Valley? Right. So getting into the Valley, that's one question. When you're in the Valley,
question. There are no smart PMs in the Valley.
Oh,
I'm kidding.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Here are two stats I'll throw out there, and we'll come back to this. So the stats are since early 2019, the FANG companies, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, are up roughly 2.5 to 3x. So from Jan 1st, 2019 to today, right? 2.5 to 3x. Okay. Coinbase, Pinterest, Stripe, they're up somewhere in the 5 to 10x. Okay, so 2.5 to 3x versus 5 to 10x, right? It's roughly double, double or triple, depending on how you, think through the math. Anyhow, so that's a question we should come back to. There was another question that I think Avi, you submitted, or we heard from people, which is like, how do you define the boundaries of what a PM does? What does a PM start with? Where does a PM end? That's a great question. That's an evergreen question. We can come back to that. Okay, but we're running a little on time, and so let's try to start. This is pod number 1. Let's try to start a weekly tradition where we end on a little bit of a carve out, and we just talk a little bit for a couple minutes on what's been on our mind. I'll start on this, and then you guys have 45 seconds to come up with your own.
Ooh, okay, yeah.
Okay, so here's one thing I read last week. I think this is a Naval quote, but I think this is a Naval quoting someone who quoted someone. This is how the Valley works. So the quote is basically, not wanting is as good as having. And I've been like, that struck me.
Yes.
That struck me as like a, like weirdly passive aggressive in some ways. And basically, I've been pondering this. I've been sitting on this and just thinking, is this true? Is it true that me not wanting something, outside of like, basic creature comforts and such, but is it true that me not wanting something is to me as good as having that thing? I don't know. It's been one of those things that's been in my head for a week, just bouncing around.
DZ, that's like so powerful. I mean, because of the time, we're not going to talk about it, but I could talk about this for a long time.
We should come back to this. I mean, this is one of those things as you achieve the hierarchy of needs, you're eventually going to get to this point. Like everyone who's super rich, they basically spend their time, well, not all of them, but like some of them spend their time reading philosophy. I think it's because at that highest level, this is where you come to. That's the thing that's been in my head all the time.
By the way, there's a great book that touches aspects of this. It's called The Science of Happiness by Jonathan Haidt. I highly recommend.
Okay.
But anyway, we can touch up on it next time.
Okay.
Because she's losing her patience with me, can I go next?
Yeah, go.
Then
what are you thinking about? What's on your mind?
So, the tragic events that unfolded in Florida with the collapse of the towers.
Terrible.
Yeah, like absolutely, like heart crushing. I was on Reddit reading a post by one of the, like, let's just call it like structural engineering firm or something, like one of the leads from the structural engineering firm, who talked about how the inspection report that the condo board, whatever, ordered would never have passed their desk if that report had been given to them, because it like sticks with jargon, doesn't follow good communication style and structure, says the facts but not assigning importance to the facts, not clearly communicating the implications or conclusions. And that got me thinking, like, geez, communication could have saved lives here. And it's important in all cases. So that's been on my mind, which is to a much lesser extent, because we build software instead of buildings. A core job of the PM is to communicate, and I think part of that is what's been on my mind is how do you improve PM craft in communication? What are best practices
I
around
love that
improving PM
topic.
craft?
That's a great topic.
Yeah, and we'll dig in on that in one of those times. And then, sorry. And then the last thing I'll say before I mute myself is there was a lot of back and forth on those Reddit threads about what incentivizes someone, a consultant, for example, to either scare or be conservative in terms of, like, are they going to get rehired for the job, or, like, are they going to be liable or not? So I think that's communication. We should dig in on this in one of the future topics. It's been on my mind because of the tragic events that.
Samir, mute yourself on the mic in the GVC.
Done.
Awesome.
Okay. Let's wrap it up. Ahmad, Avi, let's hear what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
You can go, Avi.
All right. On my mind is, like, at what will I learn more from trying to build my own product or continuing to build somebody else's product, right? So, like, and I think there's a lot of merit to both, by the way. Like, I think that, like, building somebody else's product is hugely advantageous because primarily you're doing it on their dime, right? You're learning and you're able to make mistakes. But, like, that old adage that you learn by doing is, like, very true. And I think all of us have a skill set that, like, we're at the point where, like, we could all ostensibly step away and go build something. And it's like, when is the time, right? When is it too early, too late, or just right?
We're going to need several hours on this. Although I don't think it's even. I don't think the two sides of this debate are even at all. Just for the record.
I think so. That was going to be what I was going to say, Avi. So you
really?
It was. I mean, both Avi and I have similar mindsets, but
okay.
I'll shift slightly to something that was said earlier, where Samir brought up the Socratic method. I think something that's been on my mind a lot is, I think that I have a general tendency in my, I did one of those personality tests, that my fiance loves to do. I don't necessarily like to do them, but, I did it. And basically, what I learned about myself is that I'm the kind of person who goes through the Socratic method naturally with everything.
Yes.
I mean, it actually frustrates my fiance sometimes because, like, we're planning something like, going to a movie, and then I'm, like, out here questioning her philosophy of why she does not, like scary movies. I think that is a general tendency in me. But I think it's also really helped my career. When I left Google, one of the most common compliments I got was, one of my favorite attributes of you as a PM is that you're able to cut through the BS and figure out what's actually important. And I feel like that comes from, the Socratic method. And so I was like, this is something that is like, why don't more PMs learn sort of this technique? So anyway, that I'll just.
I mean, these are all like, long conversations. We should dig into all of this stuff. These are the real of what we actually do. Okay, guys, that was a lot of fun as always. See you guys next week.
See you guys next week.
Next week.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Okay. Bye.